Now let's look at the philosophy of climate change in itself, why it matters. So I'll be looking at an African approach to the motivation problem of climate action. So what's the problem? The scientific experts in the room have told us that first, we have an urgent problem of climate change to address. In 2023, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report telling us that the Earth's surface temperature has risen since 1970 exponentially at a rate never seen before in 50 years, between 1970 to 2023, more than over the past 2,000 years. And as a result of this increase in the Earth's temperature, we've had global warming, which has also led to the consequence, which is climate change. And this rapid change in the Earth's surface temperature has also caused what we consider to be devastating environmental losses to non-human nature, which has also affected us, the human beings, negatively, and is projected to get worse. So if we rely on the scientific experts' analysis of changes in the global surface temperature of our planet, we come to the conclusion that the problem of climate change in itself is as a result of human activities, and that is emissions, greenhouse gas emissions through the different negative practices that we have been indulging ourselves in, driving gas guzzler SUVs, our energy sources and all that, and the frequent flying, those of us who fly, excluding myself, those who fly regularly to attend conferences across different regions of the planet every single year. So as a result of these greenhouse gas emissions, which has caused global warming and consequent climate change, and then the negative impacts, we've come to the conclusion that we need a solution to the problem. So where do we get the solution from? As usual, we turn to our science friends. Our scientific colleagues tell us that, well, the solution lies in science, and most of the science, when we talk about science generally, what we have in mind is Western-centered scientific solutions, which is the orthodox view of science, which has dominated the world due to the colonial past, colonial history, and all that. The British government, for example, the Royal Society, and many researchers have come to this conclusion that, well, the solution lies is we can, do solar radiation management. We can talk about solar energy, wind farms, invest in EVs and all that. If we follow this approach, we are going to get to a rapid solution that is going to be successful in reversing the negative cause of climate change. And these solutions proposed by Western science seems to be grounded on collective action. You cannot build wind farms, carry out this aerosol injection into the stratosphere and all that without massive collective action. And that requires a lot of investment. And that is not something, a kind of project that any individual can execute on their own. So if you follow this logic, the buck stops at the feet of states. So the states are the ones to handle that project, international organizations, corporations, and other massive we collectives. That is where we can find the solution. So Western science is grounded in collective action if you follow this approach to resolving the problem. But this has led to a solution, another problem. If we follow collective action, that is that only massive, large-scale collective action is where we can find solution to the problem of climate change, then it raises question about what individuals can do. And that is the problem of inconsequentialism. So the problem of inconsequentialism basically captures these contributions that individuals can make towards resolving the problem of climate action. If I stop flying, if I take public transport, I don't own an SUV, what does that do to stop climate change? It doesn't seem to make much difference, does it? So that problem is the problem of inconsequentialism. And this problem also leads to another problem, which is the motivation problem. The motivation problem captures the feeling of disempowerment felt by individual agents, individual climate actors, when they look at the enormity of the size of climate change and the role you can play as an individual. If I stop flying, if I stop driving, maybe let's say I take public transport over 10 years or throughout my lifestyle, that is not going to really stop climate change. My supervisor, for example, hasn't flown since 2005, but the Earth's surface temperature is still rising. So why is your individual action important? How do we motivate you to keep doing it? So there is a problem if you follow this individual action. And the two problems that arise from collective action project is the problem of inconsequentialism, and then you have the motivation problem, which is how to motivate individuals to take action. So where can we find a solution to these problems? So in the course of my research, I know the Western scientific enterprise is really saturated with so many talks about what we can do from this perspective and all that. And it is only recently that we've seen a flurry of research into indigenous cultural practices and ways of life and all that we consider to be useful in this regard. So in the course of my research, I look at what philosophical system in Africa can be used to motivate individual action, and I landed at complementary philosophy grounded in complementary ethics. So what is complementarity? So the theory of complementarity is propounded by a Nigerian philosopher, Innocent Azuzu, and it is grounded in this view of relationship. It connotes that everything that exists participates in what you may call a relationship. The sun, for example, emits a lot of energy. Plants need that energy to grow. Human beings need that plants to feed. And then the soil also needs to grow on top of a plant. We draw on water systems and all that. There is an interdependent relationship among every single thing you can ever imagine to exist. So, and these things exist as missing links in the sense that no individual entity can exist alone. The plant is going to draw from the soil, is going to draw from water, is going to draw from sunlight. Human beings are going to draw from the soil, they are going to draw from the plants, they are going to draw from energy. There is an interconnection. So everything exists as a missing link in the sense that there is something missing, and that is a relationship, and it has to reach out to complement other thing in order to be able to exist and flourish. So complementary ethics provides a framework that if we start thinking of human beings existing in this kind of interconnected relationship of complementarity, you can motivate individual action. But how do you do that? So I came up with three basic assumptions that I tease out from this theory. So the thesis is this: first, that there is something that is inherently valuable about fulfilling your function in this particular relationship. If I exist within an ecosystem that interrelates with another entity, that relationship is not going to flourish if nobody is doing their bit. For example, just take for example the union of partnerships in homes and all that. If everybody's not performing their function, before you know there's going to be chaos, before you know there's going to be disaster, you're going to find it very difficult to manage that system. So this is what you think about when you think of this complementary relationship. The second thesis is that fulfilling one's function cannot be achieved without an understanding that there is this inherent complementarity of all things. And then the third is that to achieve this common good, which is to heal the planet, if you may think of it that way, we have to fulfill this function. And fulfilling this function is not something you can say, okay, I'll leave it for others, I'll free ride and all that. It has to be something that is grounded in a moral obligation. This moral obligation is grounded in the understanding that everybody fulfilling their function is something that is inherently good for the planet. And then some people have mentioned this notion of relationship. I think Maduka mentioned something like that also. Reciprocity, solidarity, and all that. All these frameworks is very important in a complementary relationship. When we understand that, look, in order for us to get the planet working, we have to first of all think about doing our bit. What science does is it tells us, okay, this is the problem, and this is how we can do this, but science cannot get into our head to tell us how to behave. It cannot motivate us. So while science tells us what matters, it cannot tell us how we can come to act in ways that matter. So that is what complementarity brings into this way of motivating individual climate action. And thank you very much for giving me your time.